There is a huge problem in how to define for AIs and algorithms the goal in a way they can understand. Who knows what is the definition for the robustness of democracy? Nobody knows.
Yes, exactly. So tell us that we're doomed. I need to hear it. Welcome to Doom Debates. I'm Liron Shapira. Yuval Noah Harari is a name you've probably heard before. We're going to get to him in a second, but first, I went on Dr. Phil. That's right, the Dr. Phil. I had a cool opportunity to come talk to Dr. Phil about AI extinction. His team was putting together an episode on the future of AI in education, and they found me through Twitter. I randomly got a message from his producer, and we jumped on a call, and I started telling him, look, we can talk about AI in education. I don't have a strong opinion, but I sure am worried about everybody dying in the next few years because of AI. And the producer was like, huh, what? What are you talking about? I've never heard about this. And I was like, you've never heard about this? What about the pause letter? What about all these experts warning about a high P-doom? What about Dario Amodei from Anthropic saying 10 to 25% P-doom? What about Jan Lecky formerly from OpenAI saying 10 to 90% P-doom? And he's like, I've never heard of any of this stuff. I don't think Dr. Phil's heard of any of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, geez, well, do you want me to tell you more? And he was like, yeah, why don't you come on the show? So they kind of just squeezed me in to talk about AI doom in an episode that was otherwise about AI in education. So I got to teach Dr. Phil a little bit about the doom claim, and I got to wake up America a little bit about why they should be concerned about AI doom. So definitely check that out. I think it's a fun watch. You can only see it by going to my Substack. So head over to doomdebates.com. That's my Substack. It's one of the most recent posts. You can just look for Dr. Phil. Watch that clip. I think you'll enjoy it. You know, I'm looking at my stats, and out of all the people who subscribe to me on YouTube, less than half of you guys are subscribed to me on Substack. Are you crazy? Why would you not go to Substack and subscribe to me there too? Because that way you can get updates in your email. You're going to get exclusive content drops. You're supporting the podcast. And look, YouTube, we don't have a connection if you follow me on YouTube. YouTube can just kick me out tomorrow. What if I drop too many F-bombs? What if I say something racist? I'm going to be off YouTube. And then where are we going to be? Our relationship is going to be non-existent. Whereas on Substack, I'm going to have your email address, and that's a bond that can never be broken. So the fact that most of you think it's enough to subscribe to me on YouTube and not on Substack is insane. So head over to doomdebates.com, type in your email address in that Substack pop-up, watch that Dr. Phil clip, and check out the bonus content. Last week, I put up a written post, which is all about why I think AI is not going to proceed as slowly as physics did. Because somebody made the point, hey, look, physics is slowing down, string theory is slowing down. Why can't AI also slow down? And so I outlined very clearly what I think is the difference between AI and physics. Check it out on Substack. For those of you who choose to go to my Substack and subscribe, doomdebates.com, thank you, I appreciate it. All right, let's get into today's episode. Yuval Noah Harari is a historian, philosopher, and best-selling author known for his thought-provoking works on human history, the future, and our evolving relationship with technology. His 2011 book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, took the world by storm, offering a sweeping overview of human history from the emergence of Homo sapiens to the present day. Harari's latest book just dropped today. It's called Nexus, A Brief History of Information Networks from the Stone Age to AI. Today, we're not going to be going over the book itself. I haven't actually read it. Instead, we're going to be going over a podcast that he did this week with Stephen Bartlett on the Diary of a CEO show, where hopefully he touches on all the key points from his book, and it'll be a more efficient way for us to see what his viewpoint is, especially as it relates to, you know what, human extinction from uncontrollable superintelligent AI. All right, let's dive in.
I think that to understand what is really new and important about AI, we need perspective of thousands of years to go back and look at previous information revolutions, like the invention of writing and the printing press and the radio. And only then you really start to understand what is happening around us right now. One thing you understand, for instance, is that AI is really different. People compare it to previous revolutions, but it's different because it's the first technology ever in human history that is able to make decisions independently and to create new ideas independently. A printing press could print my book, but it could not write it. It could just copy my ideas. An atom bomb could destroy a city, but it can't decide by itself which city to bomb or why to bomb it.
Well, he's not wrong. He's mostly right when he says, hey, go back and look at the printing press. That wasn't as important as AI because the printing press could print my books, but it couldn't decide what to print. I agree. But I don't file this under clearly communicated statements. I file this under people who are groping around for the concept of optimization power to explain an intuition that they have, which is correct. But they don't have the precision to explain their intuition, so they're trying to reinvent it. They're groping around. His language is, a printing press couldn't write my book. It could just copy my ideas. So there's a distinction between copying and, I guess, creating. And he's saying an atom bomb could destroy a city, but it can't decide which city to bomb or why to bomb it. I call it groping around because that is really not a precise description. If you look at systems like the Russians were rumored to have the dead hand, right? They were working on a system to automatically retaliate if they detected a nuclear strike. So that way you could kill the entire Russian leadership. You could even take out the entire Russian military during the Cold War, and the US should still expect an automatic retaliation. This was an idea that was satirized in Dr. Strangelove, but I think it was based on at least something that the US suspected that Russia was building. I don't know if they were actually building it. Okay, I just asked ChatGPT, and apparently, yes, Russia was actually building it. It was a semi-automated system, so it would look at a bunch of different signs of whether it suspected that a nuclear strike was happening on Russian territory, like seismic reports, radiation reports, and then it would potentially trigger an automated response. Nobody knows for sure, except, classified Russian intelligence. Nobody knows for sure what the current status is of the dead hand, so there's a good chance that there's a lot of semi-automated pieces, but I can't tell you for sure whether a nuclear strike that kills everybody in Russia will still launch a retaliatory nuclear strike because that degree of automation, whether it exists, is classified. But the dead hand is possible technology, right? Technology to automatically make a decision that it should retaliate. And we have, missile guidance, it's like smart guidance, right? So it makes decisions, it takes in various factors. Or we have other computer programs that are incorporating different factors and then deciding what to do based on that. Hell, even 1800s era technology, like the printing press or like, the Jacquard loom. The Jacquard loom was invented in 1804, and it's considered a milestone on the road to computation because it was a loom that used punch cards to specify complex designs that the loom would essentially execute the design based on the punch card. So it was a way for information to drive patterns. More so than the printing press, which came around in the 1400s, it was just another step toward dynamic guidance based on compactly represented information. The reason I'm explaining all this is just to show you that there is a continuum, a pretty continuous spectrum from machines that are really dumb, like a rock that you pick up, toward, a printing press where you can rearrange letters, and that's a pretty good way to get a lot of combinatorial value out of simple building blocks, and then all the way to a Jacquard loom, where it's kind of an executable program, not exactly Turing complete, doesn't have branching and looping yet, doesn't have memory yet, but then you go all the way to the 1950s, and you do have computers that can guide missiles, that can make decisions, that can play chess. But you can see Yuval's distinction is rough because he even comes right out and explicitly says that decision-making computers, for some reason, unless they're the most recent ones, he calls them not AI. So just listen to this next part and you'll see how he's really groping. I don't think he's being precise.
There is a lot of automation out there, which is not AI. If you think about a coffee machine that makes coffee for you, it does things automatically, but it's not an AI. It's pre-programmed by humans to do certain things, and it can never learn or change by itself. A coffee machine becomes an AI if you come to the coffee machine in the morning and the machine tells, hey, based on what I know about you, I guess that you would like an espresso. It learned something about you, and it makes an independent decision. It doesn't wait for you to ask for the espresso. And it's really AI if it tells you, and I just came up with a new drink, it's called Boffy, and I think you would like it. That's really AI. When it comes up with completely new ideas that we did not program into it and that we did not anticipate. And this is a game changer in history. It's bigger than the printing press. It's bigger than the atom bomb.
So again, I don't disagree with what Yuval's saying. I think he has the correct intuition that modern AI is on a path where it is getting more and more differentiated from anything that's ever come before it. I don't have a disagreement with him on that front. But I have a disagreement on this podcast with how many intellectuals are groping around for the concept of optimization power, what I consider a solved problem, an established principle of analyzing where AI is going, a principle within what I call intelligence theory, what Eliezer Yudkowsky really pioneered before everybody else, standing on the shoulders of previous artificial intelligence pioneers, but his own synthesis that really differentiates from anything that came before it and has been built on since, which is what I refer to as intelligence theory, and the idea that human brains are notable for being optimizers, and the AIs that are coming after us are going to be much, much better optimizers, and optimization is power, and there's really nothing that we can do to stop a better optimizer, and the key to being a better optimizer is probably software. These are the kind of things that we talk about here in this cluster of intelligence science. Whereas in mainstream podcasts, like the one we're listening to now with Yuval, all you see is people groping around to the foothills of these core ideas. In the case of Yuval's statement right now, he's trying to draw a distinction, which is, again, intuitive, not precise, not formalized, just groping. But his distinction is that, it would be really impressive if my coffee machine could invent a new drink called Boffy. Really? That's what would impress you about your coffee machine, a new drink? Let me ask you, Yuval, how many degrees of freedom is the machine navigating when it's inventing a new drink? What if the whole concept of Boffy is that it's a little bit of caffeine? Right? So there's like a few different values that you could set for how much caffeine goes into the drink. Boffy, it's not decaf, it just has a little bit of caffeine. That might register as, okay, that's not creative enough, that's not inventive enough. Okay, I mean, you change the name, so you have a few degrees of freedom in how you want to brand the name, you branded it Boffy. And like, what else? What other ingredients is the machine allowed to work with? Those of us who understand optimization immediately know how to navigate a question like this. Yes, the definition of creativity is searching an exponentially sized space, and the larger the space and the less obvious the search ordering is, the more intelligence you need in order to produce a preferable output, right? That's kind of standard optimization theory, standard intelligence theory. But in Yuval's case, he's just asserting, yeah, if it creates a drink called Boffy, that must mean that it's being intelligent. And he's not really getting into that math of degrees of freedom, and he's not making that clarification that, well, if Boffy is just a simple degree of freedom away where it didn't have to tune that many parameters to make me Boffy, then in fact, Boffy is something that we could have made in the 1950s using a vacuum tube computer. This all reminds me of David Deutsch. And don't worry, there's going to be a David Deutsch episode coming soon, mark my words. Because he's somebody else who's notorious, at least in my mind, for groping his way toward the definition of optimization, never getting there, and just kind of getting sidetracked with his own vague hand-wavy definition. In David Deutsch's case, he talks a lot about creativity and creating new knowledge. Now, those things do have definitions from the optimization perspective, so we could make those terms precise, but he never does from my perspective. Anyway, let me save that for the David Deutsch episode, and let's go back to why Yuval says that a coffee machine that makes coffee for you and does things automatically is not AI. Because once again, I want to point out how fuzzy of a spectrum it is from a coffee machine that Yuval says is not AI to a machine that's creative enough to invent Boffy, which it knew that you would love that, and so therefore it is AI. Let's see the spectrum. For instance, what if the coffee machine is trying to guess what you want, but it's just using a very simple rule. It's just measuring how long you slept because it knows when you went to sleep, it knows when you woke up, and it says, only slept 5 hours, that's not enough time. Ergo, you probably want a coffee that's smarter. And that rule is like one line of code, right? It's like a simple mathematical expression. If the machine was just executing that rule, would Yuval be like, that must be AI? Well, he specifically said that if it knows whether or not you want an espresso, then it must be AI. But my guess is Yuval would be like, no, that's not AI because there's more factors involved. So let's layer on another factor. What if it uses multiple pieces of evidence that it collects? So it collects data about your night of sleep. It collects visual data about how you look in the morning, audio data about how your voice sounds. It listens to your footsteps coming down the stairs in the morning. But the way that it processes this data is all a hard-coded mapping. It's just a very simple linear expression where it just multiplies all the numbers by simple weights and then it adds them up. Or maybe it's using naive Bayes where it's just a few hard-coded nodes that represent possible values of the evidence, and then you basically apply Bayes' rule on them. So once again, it's another hard-coded mathematical expression, even though it's an expression that maps to a useful bit of reasoning, but it's all hard-coded. It's all information processing that could have been run on the ENIAC computer in the 1940s. But would Yuval say that it's AI? If it's really good at nailing down whether or not you need a strong coffee, at what point does it become AI? At the end of the day, I think Yuval probably would agree once he studied up a little bit on optimization of like, okay, yeah, you need a large search space. You need the preference ordering to be very non-trivial. You need a human to not even be able to write out instructions on how to find high-value targets within the search space. And then you need the AI to go find it anyway. So relative to a human observer who feels like the search space is really large and really hard to navigate, somehow the AI is still doing it efficiently. When you have an epistemic scenario like that, then it feels like you're witnessing creativity. That's the definition. That's how you can make it formal, and you can even quantify it, right? You can quantify the size of the space, you can quantify the position in the naive search ordering compared to the position in the AI search ordering. This is how you actually analyze AI. So in many of my podcast episodes, I keep drawing a contrast between people like Yuval making it up as they go along, groping their way to these definitions. In some cases, they're kind of on the right track. Like I would say Yuval's kind of on the right track. In some cases, they're on the totally wrong track. Somebody like Jobst Landgrebe, my previous episode, I feel like he's totally on the wrong track. But just like everybody's groping, nobody has done the reading of intelligent science to get on the same page and let's move forward. It's like we don't have consensus on chapter 1 of how to analyze the significance of AI.
Information is the basis for everything. When you start to shake the basis, everything can collapse or change, or something new could come up. To give just one example, you think about ownership. What does it mean to own something? Like I own a house, I own a field. So previously, before writing, to own a field, if you live in a small Mesopotamian village, like 7,000 years ago, you own a field, this is a community affair. It means that your neighbors agree that this field is yours and they don't pick fruits there and they don't graze their sheep there because they agree it's yours. It's a community agreement. Then comes writing and you have written documents and ownership changes its meaning. Now, to own a field or a house means that there is some piece of dry mud somewhere in the archive of the king with marks on it that says that you own that field. So suddenly, ownership is not a matter of community agreement between the neighbors. It's a matter of which document sits in the archive of the king. And it also means, for instance, that you can sell your land to a stranger without the permission of your neighbors simply by giving the stranger this piece of dry mud in exchange for gold or silver or whatever. So what a big change. A seemingly simple invention like using a stick to draw some signs on a piece of mud.
He's making a good point here as a historian that writing technology did enable ownership and it was key to enabling certain social structures. So I'm on the same page so far.
And now think about what AI will do to ownership. Like maybe 10 years down the line, to own your house means that some AI says that you own it. And if the AI suddenly says that you don't own it, for whatever reason that you don't even know, that's it. It's not yours.
Okay, hold on. Now he's talking about a scenario where your ownership of something is this dynamic state that the AI controls, and the AI is allowed to make you not own something without involving a manual step in the transaction where the owner manually says, okay, I no longer own this. Like you don't even have to write a signature. You're just delegating trust to the AI to tell you what you own and don't own. That is quite a load-bearing assumption that he's casually sneaking in. I think that his larger point is like, hey, look, don't worry about the details of whether something is information technology or a new definition of ownership. Like, the point is it's a big change. The point is that new technologies change society. And I absolutely grant him his larger point, but I do think that this gets to the pattern of him just kind of making things up as he goes along in terms of the impact of AI. He's kind of inventing his own framework, making vague connections to concepts that he's familiar with. And it's like, once again, as I tell everybody that I review their episode of other podcasts, as I keep saying, we have intelligent science right here. Like, you can come and learn it. You can actually understand what's going on, so you don't keep saying these imprecise hand-wavy things when we need you to do better. We need the discourse to be better. So please, come read the less wrong sequences. Come read AIsafety.info. Let's all get on the same page about how to talk more precisely and more productively about what AI is about to do.
5 years ago, people said AI will master this or that, self-driving vehicles, but language, this is such a complicated problem. This is the human masterpiece, language. It will never master language. And ChatGPT came, and it said, I'm a words person, and I'm simply amazed by the quality of the texts that these large language models produce. It's not perfect, but they really understand the semantic field of words. They can string words together and sentences to form a coherent text. That's really remarkable. And as you said, this is the basis for everything. Like, I give instructions to my bank with language. If AI can generate text and audio and image, then how do I communicate with the bank in a way which is not open to manipulation by an AI?
Here's another case where he nails it on the intuitive, informal level. Like, yes, correct. Large language models have absolutely been a breakthrough. We didn't think that we would pass the Turing test. We didn't think that we would have this level of natural language quality. Indeed. And yes, we are unclear on what the next generation can and can't do, on whether it can fully impersonate you to your bank or become a banker as good as a human can. Like, you're absolutely right. On an intuitive level, what you're saying makes sense. The part that I keep wishing Yuval would do better is the theoretical underpinnings of what he's saying, which is, again, optimization. So it's not just language per se. Language is what's intuitively salient to Yuval. When Yuval says, this is the basis for everything, that's an intuitive way to say that an AI that can be good at language is probably a general intelligence. But if you want to be more precise, they're actually largely orthogonal. So you could potentially have an AI that's still a master of language, but still really dumb. So famously, there's this thing called Williams syndrome in humans, where the part of their brain that deals with language is developed or even overdeveloped, but they're still severely cognitively impaired. So they could never do basic accounting or have a technical job, but they can still write good poetry and they could be really good social conversationalists. So there is such a thing as having a mastery of language and being really hopeless on basic tasks and even having a measured IQ of like 80 or below. But that's not what we're seeing with AIs. We're seeing AIs being masters of language and passing a bunch of undergraduate exams and helping you write code. They're not fully general intelligent in every way. They haven't totally surpassed humans in every way, for sure, right? But it's not as simple as Yuval here saying, hey, look, they got language. That means that they're an AGI. That means that AI is about to take over. I'm somebody who agrees that that's likely to be the case, but I'm making a more precise description of what's happening than Yuval just saying, well, they got language. That must mean they've got everything, right? There's another level at which you can analyze this, which is the level of optimization. In how many domains are they optimizing? Yes, language is a big domain. It's a new domain and it's a big domain, but being good at language doesn't always 100% correlate to optimizing well in a large number of domains. It happens to correlate pretty well in this case for some subset of domains, for some big subset of tests that it's passing. I don't want to be too hard on Yuval because, again, I think what he's saying actually makes a lot of sense, and I agree with it. I just think it's crazy that he won't just pick up an introductory textbook on intelligent science, and he'll go on a podcast and talk about it anyway. I guess because the form of the introductory textbook on intelligent science is random websites, right? So maybe somebody should write a textbook. Maybe Stuart Russell. Stuart Russell is a co-author of a very popular AI textbook called AI: A Modern Approach. I used it myself as an undergraduate. He co-authored it with Peter Norvig. But Stuart Russell is known as somebody who's pretty sympathetic to the AI doom argument. He's a doomer, I guess. I haven't heard his P-doom. But in recent years, I don't know if he's written a textbook in intelligence science. I don't know if he's brought Eliezer Yudkowsky's type of concepts to mainstream academia. Instead, he recently wrote a book called Human Compatible, which I haven't read it. I think it popularizes a lot of the AI doom ideas, but it doesn't put the pressure on somebody like a Yuval to open it up and study it before coming on a podcast and groping around and being unnecessarily vague. So come on, Stuart Russell, go make a quick textbook on intelligence science. Just feed Eliezer's less wrong sequences into GPT and tell it to write a textbook in the style of Stuart Russell. Slap your name on it, put it on Amazon. I think that would be doing a big service. And then we'll mail a copy to Yuval and Jobst Landgrip and Arvind Narayanan and a bunch of the other people whose podcasts I've been reviewing.
The big question is, why does the bank want me to call personally to make sure that it's really me? It's not somebody else telling the bank, oh, make this transfer to I don't know, Cayman Island. Mm-hmm. It's really me. And how do you make sure? How do you build this trust? I mean, the whole of finance for thousands of years is just one question, trust. All these financial devices, money itself is really just trust. It's not made from gold or silver or paper or anything. It's how do you create trust between strangers? And therefore, most financial inventions, in the end, they are linguistic and symbolic inventions. It's not, you don't need some complicated physics. It's complicated symbolism. And now AI might start creating new financial devices and will master finance because it mastered language.
Okay, I'm basically the logic police here. Let's go back over Yuval's logic. He says, you need to call your bank to authenticate your voice because that'll make your bank trust you. And financial technologies have always largely been trust technologies. So AI might start creating new financial devices because it mastered language. And what does language have to do with trust? Oh, because you use language when the bank verifies your voice, when you use a voice verification on the phone? Okay, this is incoherent logic. Right? Let me try to go over it again. Okay, the AI's understanding of how to simulate your voice, including both the sound and the words of your voice, that is a type of trust technology that's happening because the AI has mastered language. And because the AI has this trust technology, the AI will now invent new financial technologies. Okay, I don't think that that's a valid linkage. That seems like word cell reasoning, right? Like his typical historian reasoning, I guess. If you want your bank to trust you in an era where AI can fake your voice, the obvious thing to do is you just have a notary. You visit your notary once a month or however often you want. And the notary puts a note in a database that the person with your flesh and blood showed up, and that person is now holding on to this public key, and you get a private key. And whenever you want to go call your bank, you simply tell your bank, you give it a digital signature. And that digital signature will imply that you've met with a notary sometime in the last month, and the notary verified that you're this person who exists in a government database. So now the bank has an authentication based on cryptography that you are the same person that the notary logged down using an eyeball scanner or whatever, right? Like, it's not that hard to do identification in the age of AI. The only question is, how often do you want to do a notary procedure, and how easy is it to fool these notaries? I don't think it's going to be that easy to biologically fool the notary that like your eyeball looks different or like other fingerprints on your body look different. So I think the notary system is probably going to work until, super intelligent AI take over. So when Yuval is making this hand-wavy connection between AI faking your voice and AI inventing a new financial system and bypassing this obvious notary cryptography-based solution for verifying identity, I think that's a good representation of how Yuval operates in general. And not just to pick on him, it feels pretty representative of how a lot of these intellectuals operate. The general level of logic and discourse is pretty low. So that's basically why I'm coming on the scene. I can do my part. I can basically be a logic cop because I was born for this job. There's no substitute for a genuine Aspie when you need a strong logic cop. So I'll just keep making these logical arrests. Okay, but this next part is actually great, and I have no notes. I think Yuval is about to make a really solid point about why AI is going to be in a position to manipulate people. better than previous technology has ever been able to manipulate people. And I do actually think that this particular skill could be part of AGI takeover. I do think that it'll just easily become a computer virus. It'll easily take over computers, but I also think that it'll easily take over human brains just using a standard manipulation playbook. It'll just be, as Geoffrey Hinton says, I love that we have this quote from Geoffrey Hinton, a master manipulator. And Yuval gets that point, and he explains it pretty well. Let's listen.
If you really want to influence people, intimacy is more powerful than attention.
How are you defining intimacy in this regard?
Someone that you have a long-term acquaintance with, that you know personally, that you trust, that to some extent that you love, that you care about. And until today, it was utterly impossible to fake intimacy and to mass produce intimacy. Dictators could mass produce attention. Once you have, for instance, radio, you can tell all the people in Nazi Germany or in the Soviet Union, the great leader is giving a speech, everybody must turn their radio on and listen. So you can mass produce attention, but this is not intimacy. You don't have intimacy with the great leader. Now, with AI, you can, for the first time in history, at least theoretically, mass produce intimacy. With millions of bots, maybe working for some government, faking intimate relationships with us, which will be hard to know that this is a bot and not a human being.
Okay, well done. In this next segment, I have to go right back to playing Logic Cop, because Yuval goes back to the well of Sapiens, the book he's most famous for, and he hits on this big thesis he has, which is that humans are held together by these fictions, we have these shared stories, and they help us coordinate. So he goes back to the old Sapiens point, which is pretty obviously true, so that's fine to go back to that well, there's no problem there, but the reason I have to play Logic Cop is because he takes it too far, and the first thing he says is that the basic function of information is to connect, and just like that, he kind of misses a lot of the function of information. So let's listen to what he says, and then I'll tell you why it's logically flawed.
The basic function of information in history and also in biology is to connect. Information is connection. And when you look at history, you see that very often the easiest way to connect people is not with the truth, because the truth is a costly and rare kind of information. It's usually easier to connect people with fantasy, with fiction.
Logic Cop here. You just can't go on a podcast and say the basic function of information in history and also in biology is to connect. Really, in biology, when DNA encodes a protein, the basic function of that is to connect? Really? A protein that lets you metabolize food, its basic function is to connect? That's why DNA stores information? That's the function of information in biology? What are you talking about, man?
The basic function of information in history and also in biology is to connect. Information is connection.
Or even if you're just talking about in human culture, if I'm a guard watching the castle and I see the enemy coming on horseback, and then I tell the other soldiers, hey, they're coming on horseback, is that really a goal to connect, or am I just conveying information that's useful? If I'm a doctor and I've watched a bunch of bones heal, and I see somebody who's broken a bone, and I say, hey, let's set your bone like this because I think it's going to heal the fastest if it's set like this. Am I really trying to connect? I mean, I'm literally trying to connect your bone back together, but what is Yuval talking about? Why does he make these kind of generalizations that are partially correct, they're intuitive, but they fail a basic logical sanity check? It's a level of logical crime that's necessitating a stronger police force of logic cops. Okay, now let me play you another good point that Yuval makes. The host asked him what's going to happen when videos become super easy to fake. How are we going to be able to trust videos? And I agree with Yuval's answer, so let's listen.
We've been in this situation many times before in history, and the answer is always the same: institutions. You cannot trust the technology. You trust the institution that verifies the information. Think about it like with print. That you can write on a piece of paper anything you want. You can write, the Prime Minister of Britain said, and then you open quotation marks, and you put something into the mouth of the Prime Minister. You can write anything you want. And when people read it, they don't believe it. or they shouldn't believe it. Just because it's written that the prime minister said it doesn't mean that it's true. So how do we know which pieces of paper to believe as an institution? We would believe, or greater chance we will believe, if on the front page of the New York Times or of the Sunday Times or of the Guardian, you will have the British Prime Minister said, open quotation marks, blah, blah, blah. Because we don't trust the paper or the ink. We trust the institution of the Guardian or the Wall Street Journal or whatever. With videos, we never had to do that because nobody could fake them. So we trusted the technology. If we saw a video, we said, this has to be true. But when it becomes very easy to fake videos, then we revert to the same principle as with print. We need an institution to verify it. If we see the video on the official website of CNN or of the Wall Street Journal, then we believe it because we believe the institution backing it. And if it's just something on TikTok, we know that, any kid can do that. Why should I believe it? So now we are in the transition period. We are still not used to it. So when we see a video of Donald Trump or Joe Biden, the video still gets to us because we grew up in a time when it was impossible to fake it. But I think very quickly people will realize you can't trust videos. You can only trust the institutions.
Yeah, fair enough. You have to trust the institutions the same way that if you tell me, oh, my friend Joe had this political opinion. How do you know? Because he tweeted something. If I go to twitter.com or x.com, I get served up a tweet from X's database, and I just trust that anything that made it in X's database, it happened because my friend Joe logged into X and authenticated with X, and his account hasn't been hacked. So I can trust that that's an accurate quotation of Joe's opinion. And that system actually does work really, really well in practice. If we're talking about an important politician, you have to be a little bit more suspicious that maybe their account gets hacked more often or you need extra verification, but you also have people on hand providing extra verification, right? You have a bunch of reporters following them and noticing when something is fishy. So in practice, this whole idea of like, oh my God, we're going to need to trust institutions, that's pretty ordinary, right? I'm not too concerned that the AI world is going to make us have to trust institutions. That's fine. Yuval does bring up a good point, though, that if democracy fails, then these basic institutions fail. So like in Russia, there's no such thing as like an unbiased Twitter where you can just trust that it'll serve up people's true opinions because the Putin regime is able to manipulate everything. Same thing in China. So it's true that my casual trust in these kind of basic institutions like Twitter is somewhat dependent on living in a country that doesn't firewall my internet access, right? Or at least being able to tunnel under the firewall. So it's a good point there about democracy. Anyway, in this next part, Yuval is going to talk about AI's effect on human job displacement. He's going to make a prediction that like, yep, there's going to be these waves of job displacement. I generally don't concern myself with the topic of unemployment. I mean, I think it's going to be massive. I guess it comes down to the question of like, hey, if you're doing customer service and you get kicked out of your job because an AI can do 99.9% of your job, so you only need one customer service rep instead of 1,000, the one human can handle edge cases, the other 999 humans are now unemployed. I just don't think that there's going to be a corresponding set of new jobs opening up in new industries that are AI powered. I don't think that all of those new 999 humans are going to be able to use their creativity to do something that AI can't do. I might be wrong. I don't want to take a strong opinion on this, but I think it's just a matter of time until that's the case. So when I listen to Yuval or some intellectual like that talking about the subject of AI unemployment, the biggest thing I want to listen for is, do they just get that eventually AI will be super intelligent and humans will have no room to do any jobs? Do they at least acknowledge that that's the end point and it's only a question of when? And when I listen to Yuval talk, I don't see that explicitly as the end point. I don't see him explicitly acknowledging like, hey, there's no limit to eventually how much AI is going to push us out. He might acknowledge it later, but he doesn't in this segment, which is interesting.
Anything which is just information in, information out is ripe for automation. These are the easiest jobs to automate.
Like being a coder.
Like being a coder, or again, like being an accountant. At least certain types of accountants, lawyers, doctors, they are the easiest to automate. If a doctor, the only thing they do is just take information in, all kinds of results of blood tests and whatever, and they information out, they diagnose the disease and they write a prescription, this will be easy to automate in the coming years and decades. But a lot of jobs, they require also social skills and motor skills. If your job requires a combination of skills from several different fields, it's not impossible.
Yes, it's not impossible. Great, I'm glad you said that.
But it's much more difficult to automate. So if you think about a nurse that needs to replace a bandage to a crying child, this is much, much harder to automate than just a doctor that writes a prescription. Because this is not just data. The nurse needs good social skills to interact with the child and motor skills to just replace the bandage. So this is harder to automate.
Yeah, fair enough.
And even for people who just deal with information, there will be new jobs. The problem will be the retraining. And not just, retraining in terms of acquiring new skills, but psychological retraining. How do you kind of reinvent yourself in a new profession and do it not once, but again and again and again? Because as the AI revolution unfolds, and we are just at the very beginning of it, we haven't seen anything yet. So there will be old jobs disappearing, new jobs emerging, but the new jobs will rapidly change and vanish, and then there will be a new wave of new jobs, and people will have to reinvent themselves 4, 5, 6 times to stay relevant. And this will create immense psychological stress.
I think there's 2 problems that are bigger than psychological stress. Number one, the net amount of jobs is probably going to shrink. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. I just don't see these customer service people being that high value in the economy once they can no longer do customer service. I feel like that's a class of jobs that is tailor-made for humans that don't have the highest IQ. And there's just not going to be creative pursuits or management pursuits or art and science. And if you look at the entire class of jobs that are done with people with low IQs, that class of jobs isn't really growing to include fundamentally human things. It's like, okay, yeah, you can drive this truck, you can make this delivery, you can do this basic service, but it's not like, oh, you can provide really good emotional support. Because even emotional support is something that the AIs are now competitive in. So my pet prediction is that I really do see a lot of humans just getting fully kicked out of the economy. And I would say that that's a bigger problem than psychological stress. But an even bigger problem than that is that these AGIs that are kicking humans out of the economy are also going to be uncontrolled and kill us. Let's not forget that problem, right? So psychological stress is maybe problem number 3. But anyway, it's a reasonably fair analysis by Yuval of AI in the job market. We can move on.
There are many things that we want to have a connection. Like if you think about sports, robots or machines can run much faster than people for a very long time now. And we just had the Olympics, and people are not very interested in seeing robots running against each other or against people. Because what really makes sports interesting in the end is the human weaknesses and the ability of humans to deal with their weaknesses. And human athletes still have jobs. Even though in many lines, like running, you can have a machine run much faster than the world champion.
Okay, people still want to watch humans run in the Olympics, sure. But there's a disconnect between the classes of workers that are being laid off, which are like below average IQ, giant industries, right? Like maybe every waiter at most restaurants is getting laid off. The whole service industry at restaurants is going to be decimated, right? It's already starting to be. The whole customer service industry is going to be decimated. If you take a cross-section of that industry and you just say, well, it's okay because there's jobs like there's top world athletes that people want to watch. So John from customer service, who normally is like reading through a manual, right? Just trying to follow their script, just trying to provide good customer service because they understand a particular customer service flow. Suddenly, John is somebody that other people are going to pay attention to because they want a connection with John going and doing some other pursuit. Like maybe, right? I don't want to fully write this off. I don't want to predict the future. Weird things can happen, right? I mean, Twitch is kind of weird. There's kind of a lot of people on Twitch playing video games, I guess, more than I would have thought. So I don't want to fully write it off, but it does seem like there's a big disconnect it does seem like we're kind of grasping at straws, being like, look, there's a few people in the world that a bunch of people want to have a connection with, namely professional athletes. So therefore, this massive disruption that's happening to jobs where people are, these are high quality jobs. These are jobs that you can actually live on, and they're being decimated by AI. But I'm sure that the analogy with connection to athletes is going to make up for it, right? Like the scale doesn't seem to balance here, but who knows? And remember, at the end of the day, this isn't really my topic, so I don't really care, right? I hope Yuval's right. I don't care. I just think AI is going to go out of control and kill everybody. So let's keep that perspective in mind.
And another example is priests. Like one of the easiest jobs to automate is the priesthood of at least certain religions, because you just need to repeat the same texts and gestures again and again in specific situations. Like if you have a wedding ceremony, then the priest just need to repeat the same words, and there you are, you're married. Now, we don't think about priests as being in danger of being replaced by robots, because what we want from a priest is not just the mechanical repetition of certain words and gestures. We think that only another frail flesh and blood human who knows what is pain and love and who can suffer, only they can connect us to the divine. So most people would not be interested in having their wedding conducted by a robot, even though technically it's very easy to do it.
This may be the best attempt at a Hail Mary to explain why these massive segments of the human population that are about to lose their jobs might gain some other type of job that's based on connection. I mean, you can imagine that our habits change, where as we go through life, every time we do something, there's like the priest of that thing. Kind of like the Walmart greeter, like, oh, I'm entering Walmart, I'm entering Costco, I'm entering Safeway. Okay, well, there's like the priest of the store, and the priest looks me in the eye and has like a human connection with me and recites the ritualistic prayer of shopping for groceries while I then speak out to the robot, and the robot claw goes and fetches all my groceries, but the priest is there making eye contact with me, right? I mean, we may transform society so that you have a bunch of human priests on the payroll playing various roles beyond just going to church on Sunday or synagogue. It's priests all over the place, right? You're not doing customer service anymore. You're now doing human connection on the street, right? It's like an economy full of the sign shakers that tell you to enter a restaurant, right? Suddenly everybody's just a sign shaker because the AIs are doing the problem solving, the AIs are doing the production, but the humans are there having a connection with you, right? I mean, I just find this kind of fun to think about because I feel like everybody is like nuts when they're describing something plausible. But ultimately, the topic of unemployment is all in good fun because we're talking about a very high productivity society. If so many humans are getting replaced by AIs, and if we have a high productivity society, then it shouldn't be hard to at least have a really, really good welfare state. Like that should be a stable equilibrium as long as the AIs don't go out of control. So I don't lose sleep over a mass unemployment by robots situation. I think we'll figure out how to solve that. I just lose sleep over the AI becoming uncontrollable and rendering this whole discussion of employment moot. We're not going to be employed. We're not going to be unemployed. We're just going to be shoved out of the way. We're just going to be whisked off the game board, right? It's going to be the AI's game board optimizing for the AI's utility function. Next, Yuval is going to give his take on consciousness and make a distinction between consciousness and intelligence. We're going to listen to his take, and then I'll tell you what I think.
We don't understand what consciousness is. We don't know how it emerges in the organic brain. So we don't know if there is an essential connection between consciousness and organic biochemistry, so that it can't arise in an inorganic silicon-based computer. There is a big confusion, first of all, should be said again, between consciousness and intelligence. Intelligence is the ability to reach goals and solve problems. Consciousness is the ability to feel things like pain and pleasure and love and hate. Humans and other animals, we solve problems through our feelings. Our feelings are not something on the side. They are a main method for how to deal with the world, how to solve problems. Now, so far, computers, they solve problems in a completely different way than humans. Again, they are alien intelligence. They don't have any feelings. When they win a game of chess, they are not joyful. When they lose a game, they are not sad. They don't feel anything. Now, we don't know how organic brains produce these feelings of pain and pleasure and love and hate. So this is why we don't know whether an inorganic structure based on silicon and not carbon, whether it will be able to generate such things or not. That's, I think, the biggest question in science. And so far, we have no answer.
I think that's a great take. I think it's similar to my take. So if I had to guess what's going to happen in the future, I think we'll probably have AIs that are super intelligent optimizers that whisk us off the game board that we never figured out how to control, but they got into a self-improvement loop. They got into an attractor state where they kept getting more and more powerful, and humanity became powerless. And as they're doing all of this, doing this with all this intelligence, I suspect that they're going to have very little consciousness, little to no feelings. If they instantiate a human brain in order to get a really detailed simulation, then maybe the simulated brain or the simulated animal brain, maybe they'll instantiate consciousness and feelings in that thing. And they might actually instantiate many, many of these things, and they might even accidentally torture these things. That's one of the most likely routes by which these AIs may create consciousness or have a consciousness. But in terms of their own consciousness, just to get the job done of optimization, I feel like if I had to guess, I would say that they would just emotionlessly continue optimizing, because it sure seems like all the AIs we've ever created today don't have feelings. When you talk to an LLM, maybe not so much, because the way that it outputs responses, it often kind of talks about having consciousness, and then it's tough to say whether it does or doesn't. Like, I intuitively feel like it probably doesn't, but how do I know? I don't, right? It sure talks like it does, right? But then when I look at like a chess playing AI and I'm just like so clear on how it's like just searching a game tree, like a more primitive chess playing AI, I feel pretty confident that it's probably not feeling something, but I don't even know, right? I'm not sure, because like Yuval said, we're confused about consciousness. I'm just telling you my guess. My guess is that we're going to get a super intelligent optimizer that can wipe humanity off the game board without even feeling anything. In this next clip, Yuval comes as close as I've seen him to building up an AI doom argument. Steven, the interviewer, asks him to explain the alignment problem, and Yuval starts by explaining Nick Bostrom's paperclip factory thought experiment, where an AI in a paperclip factory starts going wild, trying to make paperclips and turning the universe into paperclips, and it doesn't have an off button anymore because it's in the attractor state of optimizing utility function. Yuval said that an instance of the paperclip problem has already been happening in social media. We've had trouble aligning those algorithms to our true human interests. Case in point, Facebook just told their algorithms to maximize engagement, and that led to a lot of clickbait and a lot of anger and a lot of relatives getting obsessed with things that aren't productive for them. So I think that's a fair point that Yuval makes, that social media alignment is already like a microcosm of the larger alignment problem. My question is just, how far down the slippery slope is Yuval going to ride? How far on the doom train? What is he going to conclude about future doom if we're already seeing a microcosm of doom, and the doom is only going to get larger as the AI gets more powerful and the scope of what it's optimizing increases? I want to see how far down the doom train does Yuval ride.
This is the alignment problem. When Mark Zuckerberg told the Facebook algorithms increase user engagement, he did not foresee and he did not wish that the result will be collapse of democracies, wave of conspiracy theories and fake news, hatred of minorities. He did not intend it. But this is what the algorithms did, because there was a misalignment between the way that the algorithm, the goal that was defined to the algorithm, and the interests of human society, and even of the human managers of the companies that deployed these algorithms. And this is still a small-scale disaster, because the social media algorithms that created all this social chaos over the last 10 years, they are very, very primitive AI. This is like the amoebas of, if you think about the development of AI as an evolutionary process, for this is still the amoeba stage.
The amoeba being the very simple...
The very simple life forms, the beginning, like the single cell life form. We are still, in evolutionary terms, organic evolution, we are like billions of years before we will see the dinosaurs and the mammals or the humans. But digital evolution is billions of times faster than organic evolution. So the distance between an AI amoeba and the AI dinosaurs could be covered in just a few decades. If ChatGPT is the amoeba, how would the AI Tyrannosaurus Rex would look like? And this is where the alignment problem becomes really disconcerting. Because if so much damage was done by giving kind of the wrong goal to a primitive social media algorithm, what would be the results of giving a misaligned goal to a T-Rex AI in 20 or 30 years?
Yeah, what would be the result of giving a misaligned goal to a more powerful AI? And we're not even necessarily talking 20 or 30 years. We could be talking 3 to 10 years. Nobody really knows. So what do you think, Yuval? How far are you riding the doom train? You asked the question, what's your guess? Unfortunately, I don't think that the interviewer ever asks him to finish his train of thought and go full doomer. It seems like he has it in him, if he thinks a little more, to go full doomer. So I have doom blue balls right now after listening to Yuval get this far and not reach the conclusion of like, oh, we as a species are shafted. We are currently barreling on a freight train toward extinction. The conveyor belt is taking us into the whirling razor blades, and we're barely trying to slow it down or stop. Finish your thought, Yuval. Ride the train of logic. Tell us where it goes.
There is a huge problem in how to define for AIs and algorithms the goal in a way they can understand. Now, the great thing about make money or increase user engagement is that it's very easy to measure it mathematically. Mm-hmm. One day you have 1 million hours being watched on YouTube. Then a year later, it's 2 million. Very easy for the algorithm to see, hey, I'm making progress. But let's say that Facebook would have told its algorithm, increase user engagement in a way that doesn't undermine democracies. How do I measure that? Who knows what is the definition for the robustness of democracy? Nobody knows. So defining the goal for the algorithm as increase user engagement but don't harm democracy, almost impossible. This is why they go for the kind of easy goals, which are the most dangerous.
Yes, exactly. We're optimizing on metrics that don't capture human values. All we know how to do is ask super intelligent AI to steer the universe into a region of low value. So tell us that we're doomed. I need to hear it. Okay, I listened ahead to the rest of what Yuval says on this topic, and the way that he pulls back from the brink, the way that he doesn't ride all the way to the end of the doom train, is that he says, well, maybe government can regulate the algorithms so it can tell all these different social media companies that they're not allowed to just optimize for a simple metric like engagement, that they have to have a more complex utility function. And maybe the consumers will become wise the same way that consumers have become wise about looking at ingredients of food. So we don't just buy the thing that has the most fat and sugar. We start reading the nutrition facts, we read the ingredients list, we listen to what health influencers are telling us that we should buy, and that creates an incentive for companies to have better optimization functions on the food that they sell us. So that's how Yuval pulls back from the brink, saying like, okay, yeah, social media is an example where AI is going out of control, but we have ways to pull it into control. That's fine. The only issue is that I don't think that he's modeling a super intelligent AI that can do more than just increase your engagement on a feed, but it can actually strategically decide actions to do anything with the entire universe. I think that's kind of a different ballgame. And there's no easy thing like, oh, well, the government is going to say which utility function is okay to optimize because everybody's going to be clueless, including the government, and somebody's just going to hit that enter button to just run that script and it's just going to be game over. So this is where Yuval kind of goes off into normie world and stops riding the doom train. And I go my separate way of saying like, hey, have you thought about how powerful superintelligence is? Like it's more than even more powerful than Facebook getting you to click. Have you thought that there might be such a power? No? Okay, well, I tried.
How do we stop the alignment problems, us all becoming paper clips, the social chaos, the misinformation, the silicon curtain, as you talk about in the book. How do we stop these things destroying our world? Is there hope? Are you optimistic?
I mean, the key is cooperation, is connection between humans. I mean, the humans are still more powerful than the AIs. The problem is that we are divided against each other, and the algorithms unintentionally are increasing the divide. If something ultimately destroys us, it will be our own delusions, not the AIs. The AIs, they get their opening because of our weaknesses, because of our delusions.
When humans came on the scene, we just started brushing other species out of the way, taking their land, taking their meat, doing whatever we wanted with them, because we were more intelligent than them, because we were more powerful than them. So it's pretty crazy to just see Yuval claim, yes, the way that AI is going to come and tear humanity apart is because it's going to exploit our own weaknesses, our own differences. Have you even considered the claim? Just consider the claim. Never mind if you disagree with it. Just acknowledge the claim that AI is going to be dangerous to our species because it's going to be much smarter. It's going to be much more powerful. Have you even considered that claim? It's one thing if Yuval says, yes, there's a lot of people who think that there's attractor states when you get to superintelligence where you don't program in an off button and the optimization criterion isn't something that a government can regulate. There's a lot of people who say that, but I disagree because I think that the largest possible intelligence that any agent can have is bounded, or it's only going to scale in a slow, manageable way. Like if Yuval was actually addressing those kind of arguments the way some people do, like Robin Hanson attempts to address those arguments, right? Then fine, then you'd be at the next level of discourse. But to go on a podcast and start thinking that you know what the alignment problem is, and then sound wise and be like, it's going to be humans actually destroying ourselves. No, it's not going to be us destroying ourselves. It's going to be something that we built that's a more powerful form than us, a more powerful being than us, that we accidentally let slip out of control, and then it's just going to turn around and brush us aside. That's the problem. You have not engaged with the problem. You are now bringing your podcast to a close without even engaging with the problem. And as you know, I'm here on Doom Debates, not just as the logic cop, but also as the engaging with the AI Doom argument cop. You have not engaged with the AI misalignment problem. You have not. It's a waste of time when people come into the alignment discussion without having read up enough to be able to engage with the argument. And it's at the point where you, Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO host, it's now a common thing you do, that you bring guests on and you broadcast to a large audience about the AI alignment problem, and you don't have your guests actually engage with the problem. I've now reviewed 2 of your episodes, this one with Yuval Noah Harari and a recent one with Brett Weinstein. You need to get educated about it, and then you need to hold your guests to a higher standard. Hopefully you're going to decide to raise the level of discourse. I believe that you've got what it takes to do that. You just have to take it seriously and try. That's it for Yuval Noah Harari. Now, I haven't read that much of his work. I read Sapiens a long time ago. I thought it was okay. I haven't read any of his other stuff. When I saw he had a book tour for his latest book, and a lot of his new topics were AI related, I wanted to find his piece of work that was most relevant to Doom Debates. And I think this interview is probably it. I suspect there's no other better interview where he talks more about AI Doom. I think we pretty much heard what his ideas are. If I'm mistaken about that, please let me know. I'm happy to do a follow-up episode because I want to make sure I'm hitting his best arguments, his most relevant arguments. But assuming that it's nothing more than what we've heard, well, he didn't really engage with the idea of superintelligence. He briefly alluded to it. He said, what if this is an amoeba and in 20 or 30 years, we're going to have like a dinosaur level, right? He tried to make an analogy like, wow, this is going to be much more powerful, the same way that life got much more robust over time, right? Multicellular organisms gained advantages over single-cell organisms. Maybe something analogous can happen with AI. Okay, but think about your own analogy and then compare it to the human brain. What if the human brain is like the amoeba and something is going to be like the dinosaur relative to that? What does that mean? Why would you think that human infighting is the thing that's going to cause us harm when we have this dinosaur-level AI, right? Like a much bigger AI or a much stronger AI than the human brain. Why don't you think harder about what it means for something to be even more intelligent than the 3-pound piece of meat in our head is? Okay, because I think you end up with a very different scenario, a scenario that just smashes through every pattern that you as a historian think you're familiar with. smash us through the idea that information is really connection. Smash us through the idea that humans are our own worst enemy. No, we're not our own worst enemy. A super intelligent being that doesn't care about us is our worst enemy, right? So I just feel like Yuval is just not in that headspace. I don't think that he's really read that much Eliezer Yudkowsky, or he hasn't read enough Nick Bostrom. He's clearly read some Nick Bostrom. Like, whatever it is, he's unfortunately not engaging with the argument, and he doesn't leave me with much to say. The one thing that I can say in his favor is that within the narrow regime of like human level intelligence, where the AI is not crazy super intelligent and not just instantly wiping us off the game board, he makes a lot of sense when he's talking about, oh, social media is kind of unaligned, or yeah, people are going to get unemployed, or like, we don't know what we're doing with alignment, right? So a lot of the points that he makes does make sense, but he really needs to come back on the doom train, follow the logic, and ride it further. I hope he does. I hope his next book is about that, and we'll see. Remember, you can go watch me on Dr. Phil. Just go to doomdebates.com. You're going to get that pop-up to type in your email. Please do, because you don't want to miss the next exclusive content drop. Substack also has a like button that you can smack if you see any posts that you like. Your engagement and social sharing is super helpful for growing the audience and helps our civilization bring our A game to the AI doom question. That's all for now. I'll see you on the next episode of Doom Debates.